Member for Castries South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join the Leader of the Opposition in expressing disappointment with the tone in which the deliberations this morning has taken. I think this morning, and like he quoted, despite the intense debate of yesterday, there was a spirit of, congeality and working together, and there were compromises from the government side. I mean, I'd never seen before in this House, or it's very rare, that we had seen concessions being made, and I think following on what happened yesterday, it was very welcome. It was very welcome. And the member from Beaufort South made a presentation, and it's a very simple point he was making, and there was absolutely no need for the member from Castries South is to offset the tone that we had this morning. And I need to say to the member from Castries South is, we are not against incentives, both sides. And anybody involved in public policy in this region or anywhere in the world will agree that incentives and concessions are part of the regime that attract investments to your country. You may argue that one particular government was more liberal in granting incentives and concessions, and they appropriately passed the incentives regime to allow for that. Another government might be more restrictive in what they give in incentives and concessions, and we can have differences, ideological differences, nationalistic differences about just how much incentives should be given. The member from Beaufort South was not arguing whether incentives should be given or not. There's no need to argue that he gave so much and what he gave and what he did not give. That was not the point of the presentation from the member of Beaufort South. I think we will all accept, and it is the point that the member was making, that having in legislation a clearly defined listing of the incentives and concessions gives certainty to investors. And it establishes a level playing field. If an investor is coming to your country, what this says is that I have no certainty as to the limit of what I can get. Because I can apply for what the Act says, but there is space for me to get any amount more. There is no limit as to what I can get. There is no definition in there or any provision that according to the size of my investment, what I qualify for. There is no certainty. But also important, Mr. Speaker, is there is no level playing field. There's no level playing field. Because the very act that I have to apply to cabinet and a group of ministers means what's given to me is subject to their own interpretation and assessment of me. A particular minister may not like the investor, may not like his disposition, may not like his project, and may decide and influence his colleagues not to give a certain amount. Of course, we're speaking of beyond what the Act provides. So this change introduces uncertainty in the provision of incentives and concessions, because it says cabinet, in its own discretion, can provide extra beyond what the Act has. And the Prime Minister's words were a little unfortunate. The Prime Minister in his explanation says he does not want to use the Act to discriminate between investors. The Act does not discriminate. The Act provides certainty. It provides a criteria for selection of who gets what. Making a change and making it open-ended, where a group of men and women can decide on their own how much more to give, that is what will create discrimination. Because the Prime Minister may not like investor A's project. He may not like the investor for that matter, and can influence what that person gets. And that is the difficulty with the change, and this is what the member from Beaufort South was saying. That destroys certainty. It destroys the level playing field.
And it's in conflict with other acts.
Well, I'm not a lawyer and I'm going to argue about it, but the member from Beaufort South is saying it's in conflict with other acts, and even if so, then it is probably even unconstitutional, Mr. Speaker. The member from Castries South says about checks and balances. Where are the checks and balances? Where are the checks and balances in this, the amendment being made? And he says the fact that it would be gazetted is sufficient. Is it really sufficient? How many people in St. Lucia read the Gazette? How many? I don't think there are more than 75 to 100 people, maybe more, because there are more lawyers than that, and they primarily read the Gazette. So you're saying to me, I apply for concessions, I receive it, another investor applies for concession, he receives it, I decide I want extras, I apply to cabinet, I get my extras, and it is published in the Gazette, and you will say to me that's a check and balance? Now what happens when I am the one who feels, how could my competitor have gotten more than me? What do I have? What recourse do I have? Can I say I was treated unfairly? I can't. The law provides for cabinet to give the extras. Can I say it's in breach of any law? The law gives cabinet the right to make the decision on the extras. So what recourse do I have? And maybe the lawyers can explain to me, what recourse do I have if I believe as an investor that my competitor has been given extras beyond the act that both of us apply under, and I feel I'm being treated unfairly? Now the lawyers, please answer that for me. Can I now say that you're in breach of the law when the law says you have the right to give it to me? Maybe there's some principle in law. There's always a principle in law to try and justify something, Mr. Speaker. But on the face of it, there is a difficulty with giving cabinet the unfettered right to give as many extras as they want to. And there's no criteria that would guide how they give the extras. Pardon? I can't hear you. But if there is a criteria, if there are established parameters for the extras, it's not stated here. And the member from Beaufort South is saying, maybe we should go back. No, I'm not talking about the VAT. I'm talking about 12. No, I don't think we're talking about the same. We are. Okay.
We're not talking about the same thing.
All right. So somebody has an investment of 175 million. Somebody has an investment of 150 million. Both of them above 50 million. The one with the investment of 175 million, you give him so many more extras. You don't give it to the 150 million because you don't like him or their differences or whatever. What recourse does he have? What recourse does he have? That's the point I'm trying to make. What the member of Beaufort South is saying, maybe this should be tightened up and should be worded in a way which removes that uncertainty and which destroys the level playing field that we ought to have. That having in the legislation the incentives clearly spelled out and who qualifies for it according to what criteria introduces certainty and it establishes a level playing field. This act, this amendment changes that. So member from Cassie's office is not an argument about whether we should give incentives. It's not an argument about whether we give more or you give more. It's not an argument of whether yours better or ours worse. That is not the point before us. The point is one, asking you to reflect on that amendment and see whether or not that's in the best interest of St. Lucia to do it in such a way, and whether or not it is in keeping with the laws of St. Lucia. I thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.